Time now for our Rants and Raves of the week, starting with Dan. I knew you were going to do this one.
Oh, yeah, absolutely.
We'll forgive you.
Well, I have a rant for the demise of the Providence Phoenix. The second of the three great Phoenix papers to go down in the last year and a half. I guess I'm ranting about the situation. I certainly don't blame Stephen Mindich, the owner. I think he kept it going for as long as he could. Unfortunately, it happens at a really bad time because the Providence Journal is cutting way back after a change of ownership. And we'll see if anybody can step up. I'm hoping maybe Rhode Island Public Radio, which already does a great job, beefs up some of their local reporting online. Maybe Go Local Prov can step up their game, but there is a real news gap in Providence right now, and the death of the Providence Phoenix only makes it that much worse.
So the surviving one is Portland. Is that going to survive?
Well, you know, I heard a couple of months ago from an inside source that Portland was doing pretty well, but even then, people knew that Providence wasn't doing too well. What we have found in the last couple of years is that in smaller, more insular cities, an alternative weekly tends to do better. Whereas Providence is a big city, it's almost part of Greater Boston. That was a tougher nut for them to crack.
All right, Tom.
I just have a quick one. There's a dinner this past week. It's hosted by the New England Academy of Journalists called the Yankee Quill Dinner. And what they do, they recognize the lifetime achievement of the kind of journalists that we don't think very much about. These are people who have spent entire careers in small towns, the little town newspaper, sometimes even the weekly. And they're good. They're good journalists, but and many times they've passed up opportunities to go elsewhere. So to have an organization that takes the time to recognize these people who so often labor outside of journalism spotlight, I think is a good thing. It's too many to name, but maybe if people are interested, it's on the website and you can read the bios and go back and see some of the great journalists who've come out of New England over the past 100 years, 100 plus years.
I got one a few years ago.
Yeah, you did.
Yeah, well, occasionally they go beyond the pen and ink. They'll deign to go to a broadcaster.
One of the recipients was Karen Bordelot, the editor of the Providence Journal. 40 years ago, she and I shared an internship at the Woonsocket Call.
Wow.
So,
that's right. She was the first woman editor of the Providence Journal.
Well, Joe Bergantino also works with us this year. All right, Callie, what do you got?
Well, I have a rave for one.
What a surprise!
Yes, on the subject of diversity and BuzzFeed. Absolutely, you know. So, as you know, some of these new, I guess they call them verticals or whatever, the Voxes, the BuzzFeeds, all of them have been severely criticized, the 538s, for their lack of diversity in the editorial ranks specifically, but just in general. And BuzzFeed, you know, sort of took that criticism. I mentioned a few weeks ago they hired some top level folks of color, and now they're coming out to say, you know what, we're going to make a statement about diversity. We're going to audit who's in the ranks specifically. We're going to let everybody know, and we're letting you know right now that this is a top-down, bottom-up initiative, that we want to see it across the board. We're going to talk about it. We're going to work through it. And here's the thing that makes this so great. These are not the gray hairs. These are not the people that always had the excuse, well, that's not how we were raised. We didn't know these people. BuzzFeed people went to school together. They, you know, walked home together. They worked together. So it's ridiculous that diversity has been lacking in these areas. So for Ben Smith, who's the head guy, to step forward and say, here it is, and we're making it public, good for them. I couldn't
raise louder. How big is the staff? Do you have any idea?
I don't know how big it is. I think but they've been hiring like crazy in the last few years. By the way, it's interesting. They have already gender parity, but, you know, race parity they do not have. Yeah.
All right, Adam.
I got a rave for Chuck Todd, the new host of Meet the Press. I'm actually not entirely sure how I feel about the broadcast based on what I've seen so far, but he's done something which I think is really commendable, which is make a point of talking with people who are critical of that show and sort of the broader model that show represents. He sat down with Breitbart News a few weeks back, and then most recently sat down with Jay Rosen, the NYU journalism professor, who is very, very tough on the Chuck Todds of the world. And they had a Q&A.
I mean, what's their issue?
Jay Rosen, you know, to speak sort of quickly, and feel free to chime in. I think he thinks what they do is superficial, that they strive for artificial balance. They don't focus on facts, but they give, you know, the left and the right a chance to duke it out, and that's it. More about entertainment than information. So Rosen threw a bunch of questions at Chuck Todd. Chuck Todd went back at him in a very articulate, thoughtful way. And I think the fact that he's willing to do this bodes well for what the future may hold.
You know what was an amazing story that came out this week? Maybe you all had heard it before, but that Deborah Turness, the president of NBC, had actually tried to get Jon Stewart to host.
Yes.
I mean, which would have, that would have been a very, very odd dynamic. I mean, everybody loves Jon Stewart. That's beside the point. It would have completely changed the whole.
You know what else?
That Jon Stewart has said, hello, not a journalist, comedian.
Right.
Well, and of course, some of us, like myself, think that's totally bogus. He's a really good media critic pretending to be a comedian, and if he'd hosted Beat the Press, he would have had to admit that.
He just said he's not a journalist, though. That's his point.
Yeah, but if you're a media critic, you're a journalist.
Well, not all of
discussion for another time.
That's another. Yeah, okay. That's it. Okay.
All right. Well, I have a rave today for Adrian Walker, columnist for the Boston Globe, who put into perspective a report that came out earlier this week from the ACLU about stop and frisk in Boston's minority neighborhoods, which is an important report. I'm not diminishing that. The report was conducted between 07 and 10, and there was some issues around the fact that it was dated and policies have changed. But beyond that, some of the language in the report that was totally written by the ACLU kind of seeped into news coverage without any kind of stop checking, targeting minority community, targeting people. And he just put it in perspective of, I thought did a really good job, because some of the stop and frisk, one of the complaints of the report was, well, it didn't lead anywhere. There was no, but apparently if you find something on something, it goes into another category. And so it was just a little, I thought, needed perspective on a report that got a lot of buzz around town.
I still think it's a powerful report, and it says a lot that needs to be looked at.
Yes, I agree.
Yes, So, but check it out. Make people look at it more thoughtfully.
All too easy when we don't have a ton of reporters working and producers to just take a press release and sort of regurgitate the language on air or in print.
Because BPD also challenges the whole stop and frisk language. He said they never did that.